Welcome, mead makers. Today we are, by popular demand, going to make a original basic mead. Now, you might wonder, why do we have to make an original basic mead? Everybody knows how to do that, right? Wrong. A lot of mead makers will start out doing a mead that, by definition, is quite a lot advanced, and you really don't want to do that before you've mastered the basics. So this is for all you out there who want to make original basic mead starting out and how to do this correctly. Now, if you liked what you see, do hit the like button, do subscribe to my channel, and hit that little bell so that you can follow and get notified of when I upload more good videos. All right, so when we make mead, there's a few basic things we absolutely need to have. Our equipment, for example. So let's go through that and make sure that everybody knows what to get in order to make their first mead. All right, let's start with the most important, a fermentation vessel. I have one of my honey buckets. That's number one. Number two, you need honey. Pretty much any type of real honey can be used. It doesn't matter if this is Costco or Walmart or anything. For as long as it's good honey, you can use it. Now, you have the fermentation bucket, you have honey, and you need water. The third one, yeast. I use, and this is not advertising, but I use Mangrove Jack's, I think it's MO5. Yeah, MO5. For me, this works perfectly. It's never failed me, so I'm sticking to it. There are hundreds and hundreds of yeasts types out there. Find something that works for you. Like I said, I swear to Mangrove Jack's MO5. What you choose, totally up to you, sir. Lastly, I would highly recommend that you get a hydrometer. This is a tool to help you measure the sugar content of your must. The must is the mix between the honey and the water, and later on the yeast. So what we're going to do here is to make sure that we get the perfect amount of honey to water ratio, and therefore the perfect specific gravity, as it is called. Specific gravity is a measurement of how much sugar there is in the must. You will also need an airlock to help the CO2 that will be generated through the fermentation process escape the must. For that, I use just a simple airlock like this. You can buy that on Amazon or wherever. Support your local brewery shop and get it from there as well. Now, this video could very easily have ended here with me just showing mix A, B, and C. At the very basic level, this is actually what we do, and I am going to show you that. But here's the thing, if you stick with this video all the way to the end, I'm going to show you also some advanced techniques that will increase your success rate, and it will really level up your mead making game. So stick with me, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that bell to make sure you get notified about my upcoming releases. Now, today I am going to use most of the bucket I showed you, this one, and I'm aiming for just about 16 liters of total must. So in order to figure out how much honey I need for this, I went to gotmead.com. That's one of my favorite websites for mead. And I checked out their making mead calculator, mead making calculator. And I got up that on 16 liters, I need approximately 5.3 kilograms of honey with a sugar content of 80%. This is a little bit advanced, but don't stress too much about it. Good honey will have sugar content just around 80%. So for me, and for this particular batch, 16 liters total, I'm going to use first 5 kilos of honey, and then I'm going to measure it around 16 liters. And if needed, I will just refill with a little bit extra honey. So keep that in mind. So we're targeting, and now we're back to the specific of the hydrometers. We're targeting a sugar content which on this hydrometer will measure 1.1. I'll see if I can find it. But you'll find this on your own. There's the camera. You'll see that on hydrometers, you will be able to find that point, 1.100, somewhere on your scale. To me, this is what I generally use. I try to make my meads fit just around 12.5% when it's completely done with this fermentation process. And then I will stabilize it and resweeten it. This is part of what I'm going to show you at the end of this video in order to level up your game. Normally, you can do a mead where you put a lot more than 1.100 gravity in it. You can kick it up to say 1.2 and still get a, completely done, finished fermentation that levels out somewhere in the area of 1.01, so 90% done, or something in that area. So you get a semi-sweet thing. But I like to have the yeast completely flat out. Then I will kill the yeast, and then I will make sure no residual wild yeast that will come in by air can reproduce and start re-fermenting. Again, this is something I will talk a little bit more about at the end of this video. So stay tuned. Again, subscribe, like, and hit that bell. Make sure you get all my next videos and the videos after that. All right, so let's start making mead. The very first thing I'm going to do, and which I suggest you guys do too, is take your yeast, dry yeast is in this case, and rehydrate it. What I do very simply on the base level is that I take my yeast, still mangrove jacks, put it up some water in a glass and just have it in there and let it very slowly rehydrate. Rehydrating meaning mixing it up with water and starting the yeast over. Right now it is dormant and we want it to get lively. So I'm just going to cover this up and leave it. All right, so I have skipped a little bit ahead now. I figured it was no need for you guys to literally see me mix out a lot of honey into water. So I have now mixed the whole thing. Just look at this beauty. See how golden and nice this is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fill this up to 16 liters. That would be somewhere around here. And then I'm going to take a gravity reading, a sugar content reading. Okay, so I have filled up the fermentation bucket to 16 liters, as I'm showing here. See, it's nice and filled up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of it in this jar here, in this glass, and then I'm going to measure the sugar content. The target content that we're looking for, which is called original gravity or specific gravity, is 1.1000 or just thereabouts. So we have the tools I need now to check the gravity. I have I think it's called a wine thief. I'll put a link to where you can get this in the description below. So I'm literally stealing a little bit of this. Mind you, I have sterilized everything here in Starsan so that it has zero bacteria that can go back to the mead and do something nasty. Okay, so let's see here. Right now we are at... Oh, that was not good enough. Let's see here. There we go. So right now I'm gonna have to set this down and measure it. We are at 1.80 or something, which tells me, of course, that I need to have more honey in this, which is what I'm gonna do right now. I'll be right back. So we've got our last piece of honey, and now we'll pitch it in and stir it about and take a new reading. I did dilute it already a little bit with more must from this batch, just so that I wouldn't have trouble with, semi-hard honey in the bottom of this bucket and having to dissolve it there. Then I have a stirrer. It has, of course, been sterilized by Starsan, and I'm just gonna fix this up and take a new reading. All right, so I'm back with my hydrometer and my wine thief, and let's take a test here, see what we get. And we are just around, so see here, I am pretty proud of this one. Have a look. That red area, okay, I'll move it here. That red area is 1.100, which is spot on where I wanted it to be. So we are most likely at 1.102. I'm happy with that. I'm not going to do anything more with the must. I'm going to put this one back in, given that everything is sterilized and so on. Now, what we want to do to make sure that the yeast has the optimal survivability is to adapt it to its new environment. And a lot of people, they pitch their yeast directly into the must, and for a lot of times that works well. But then you have weaker strains of yeast that just doesn't do well with the shock that it is to be put into a very sweet environment. And it can, I'm not going to say that it happens often, but it can cause the yeast to struggle in its growing phases and even throughout the fermentation as well, and create off flavors in your mead. So generally what I do, and what a lot of other people who does mead do, is that they acclimatize the mead, or rather the yeast, to the environment of which it will be living in, which is the mead. So we use the wine thief to literally just have a little bit of mixture into the yeast mix, and put the yeast mix back on the stirrer, or leave it to acclimatize, and then we increase the must in the mix over time, and that helps it get acclimatized to an increasingly sweeter environment, also to the water which it will be, living in. Different types of water across the country or wherever you are have different qualities and different profile, and you want to make sure that the yeast is eased into that, not shocked into it. So I'm going to put this one back on the magnetic stirrer for 15-20 minutes and increase it. I'm going to have it up to about 2 liters altogether. I'm not going to show you every step, because it's literally every 20 minutes increase with about half a liter up to about 2 liters for this batch, for my batch. I generally say do it in 3 or 4 or 5 steps. Now, another thing that will level up your game in terms of mead making is checking your water profile, especially the pH levels. And for that, I use a pH measurement, a digital pH meter. I bought this on Amazon, fairly cheap. I'll put up a link for that. And I'll take the wine thief, and I'll take a small sample from the must into a glass like this, and I'll just measure the pH level. Now, what this does is that it'll tell me the acidity of the combination between the water and the must. The yeast will want an optimal living environment also in terms of its pH levels. So what I'll do is I'll just measure it, and this one comes out at 4.4 pH, which is quite optimal for the mangrove jacks. And so personally, I'm not going to do anything with the water here. If you have too high a pH or too low a pH, you may want to adjust it using citric acid or what's it called? Deacid, I think is called, the stuff I buy at least. Again, just check out with your local brewery shop. They will know what you're talking about and they will help you. So that brings us to the final part of the basic, most simplest way of making mead, and that is to pitch the yeast. This is the yeast that has been rehydrated and it's up and running now, and everything should be good. So literally what we do is say salute and put it in the mix. I will just make sure that everything gets in, so I'll mix it up with a bit of must, and the glass is now empty. So there you have it. We have had the equipment, we have readied the equipment, we've readied the water, the honey and the yeast, and we've put it in the fermentation vessel, and we've measured the sugar content. Everything's up to speed. We've had in the yeast, and it's now ready to be sealed and put off to ferment. So normally what we do is put on a lid. I'll put that back there. Put on the lid like this. Smack it, of course, make sure it's airtight, and then shake the whole thing about to make sure there is as much air in the must as possible. For the first day, the yeast is in its growing phase and you want it to have access to air. A lot of beginners just shakes it about 2-3 times a day, and it works, don't get me wrong, but there isn't all that much oxygen that actually gets in there. It works, it gets the job done, but it takes generally a lot longer time. That sums up the simplest way of making mead. Now, I promise you that if you stuck around, if you want to see a more advanced way and more secure way, for that matter, of upping your game in terms of mead making, I would show you what I do. So before I show that, let me remind you again, hit my like button, hit my subscribe button, and do put on that bell to make sure you get notified about my upcoming releases. If you want to see more about my videos, you can check out the videos here and here, or maybe it's just up there. You will find a few other videos I made that shows how I make different types of mead. All right, let's move on to the little bit more up the game, a little bit more advanced way of making mead that really makes a better mead in the end. All right, we're at the end of the video still. So I'm going to show you what I do as an advanced technique for rehydrating the yeast. So at the beginning of the video, we just had water and yeast, and that was it. I have stirred it about and to make sure that all the yeast has contact with water. Now, the advanced part, which really helps the yeast go along, is to help it along using something called GoFirm. This is literally a lot of booster and nutrients for the yeast to kick off. And what I do is that I put it in an Erlenmeyer glass jar. I forgot the exact name of that. And I have it on a magnetic stirrer. That, over time, will then really kick the yeast into action. And this will drastically increase the yeast's survivability rates when it comes into the new environment that it will have in the fermentation bucket. Now, one thing you also would want to have in your everyday mead making kit, and this is ranging from basics to expert, is a sterilizing agent. Personally, I swear to what's called Starsan. This is something that pretty much every brewer uses, and you can't go wrong with it. So get yourself some Starsan to sterilize your equipment. Everything you use, everything you touch, use Starsan on it. This is a concentrated solution, so read the details and make your sterilizing solution that way. All right, so we're gonna pitch the yeast into the Erlenmeyer jar. I have put up a funnel. It has been sterilized with Starsan, so everything's okay. Right, that's really how simple it is, and I'm just going to put it over on my magnetic stirrer, and this is going to have its fun for an hour or two. All right, so here we have the yeast on the magnetic stirrer and really getting along nicely. There is GoFirm in the mix, and I can already see now that it's starting up and that it is thriving. In about an hour's time, I'm going to pitch it in the must. All right, for those of you who have already viewed my Franken-Fermenter video, you know that I have my own little gizmo that will secure rotation of the must as well as aeration of the must for the first 2 to 3 days. Now, that is the growing phase of the yeast, and it's really important that it gets the optimal environment. Now, before we do that, I want to show you the other things I do to make sure that my yeast and my must are optimally done. First of all, if you have seen any other mead making, wine making, or beer making video, you will see that a lot of people talk about nutrition, as in yeast nutrition. I also do that, and I do it for good reason. Honey, as opposed to, for example, in beer, doesn't have the same amount of same quality of nutrients. It's a load of different sugars, but it doesn't contain that much other micronutrients. So for wines and for mead, we want to add yeast nutrition, and that's a really important part. However, now I said I would take you into a little bit more of a advanced way of showing what I do with mead. Normally, if you add nutrients, you want to just put it in as soon as you have the yeast in and let the yeast do its thing. I want to starve it a little bit. And the reason for that is if you starve it a bit, it gets more motivated once it actually gets food. What I do is I put in the yeast. Now, after I put in the yeast, I put on the lid. And as I mentioned, I'm going to put on my Franken-Fermenter lid on this, which has an aerator as well as a self-priming pump. What this does is that for the first 24 hours, it will just rotate the mixture, and it will also blow in a lot of fresh air continuously. This will kickstart the fermentation, of course, but it will also make it hungry because it doesn't get fed immediately. After 24 hours or so, I will put in a third of the nutrients I have ready for the must. I use Fermade O for my nutrients. It's a staple in mead making, and I really cannot praise it well enough. Another thing that I very often do, actually in all of my meads, is I put defoamer on it. I know a lot of people, they don't use it for whatever reason, but I really hate these foam bombs or volcanoes. So to me, it's just a smart way of making sure that I get fermentation the way I want it, because defoam doesn't impact the fermentation, but I don't get all that foam. It also allows me to have a fuller bucket without suffering the consequences of a lot of foam, a lot of pressure, and everything goes to pieces. So I'm going to add my defoamer. All right, so I have my defoamer. It's look like this. I'm not sure if this is the only brand on the market, but whatever that is, again, ask your local brewery shop or brewer's supply, and they will have something that will take care of this. So all I do is to, let's see here, put it in here like this. I'm not too concerned with how much it is. And I'll just whiff this around, and very quickly we should start seeing the effect of it. See here? Now, all the foam that was already here is pretty much gone. So what this does is that it literally just breaks the surface tension so that bubbles that up here can't survive. They will literally just pop. And for me, that's a huge benefit. Like I said, I can really fill this up. I can make sure I get the maximum out of the bucket, and no foam volcano. Okay, so for those of you who saw my Franken-Fermenter video, I want to show you how this looks right now. Let me just turn this about a little bit and turn the camera down. Ta-da! I had a gentleman say for my last video, the Franken-Fermenter video, that since I didn't show directly that it was working, the video was a fail. Well, here it is. So, it is making a lot of noise, but as you can see, the liquid goes through here and will have a continuous movement. The air goes through this air pump. This is a normal aquarium pump with food grade silicone hoses and a stainless steel aerator stone at the bottom. I'll see if I can put this one up here, if I can open it up and show you how it works inside. Can't see much down here, of course, but everything is actually moving around, which will release trapped gases in the must as the yeast does its work. and it will come, you know, all the air that gets pumped in here will of course get out the airlock here. So of course the pump has been cleaned up with Star Sun and everything else, and everything is sterilized. There's a air filter here to make sure nothing gets in there that isn't supposed to get in there. And that's pretty much everything I have for you today. What's going to happen now is that I'm going to put this off for fermentation for the next 3 days, 2 to 3 days. I'm going to put nutrients in it, and at around 24, 48 and 72 hour intervals. Of course, I will also use the hydrometer to test how much sugar the yeast has consumed for the next 72 hours. I'm assuming that I will hit around 1/3, which would give a specific reading of around 1.03 to 1.035, somewhere around the third day, at which point I will add the last 1/3 of the nutrients to the mix, and I will stop all air, because then the yeast is done growing and is supposed to go over into the final phase of just spending the rest of the sugar. And that again should take 7 to 10 days if everything goes according to plan. The pump will stay on to circulate everything so that the must releases all trapped gases as the yeast does its work. And hopefully in 7 to 10 days, I will be down at 1.0 on specific gravity. The yeast will have done its work and pretty much dead, and I can transfer the must from its primary bucket to its secondary fermentation vessel, which will most likely be a 15-liter glass carboy. Alternately, I'll just put it straight to a oak barrel. It depends really. You don't have to put it on an oak barrel, of course. You can put it on a secondary fermentation bucket for 2-3 weeks. That should be no problem. Just make sure that it's airtight, and this will allow the remaining yeast to completely die out and everything to just settle. When that is done, when you see by gravity reading that there has been zero activity, gravity hasn't gone down for 2 to 3 days, the yeast is dead. And what you do then is you stabilize it with Camden and with metabisulfate. After that, you can put it through bottle for maturing. Still with this one, I would say that 6 months on bottle is an absolute minimum. Mead is a maturing product. It just gets better over time. You can drink it young, but the flavor and the complexity of flavor and the quality of the flavor after a year compared to 2-3 months, it's just amazing. All right, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please do subscribe to my channel. Do hit the like button. It does tell me that you guys like what you see. And if you have subscribed, do hit the bell button so that you get notified about my next releases. Have a fantastic Mead days ahead.